started off as a PG podcast, but then Devin just kept on dropping shits and fucks, and now...
That's right. We are live.
The ghost faced himself, Brandon Tanev.
This isn't like the start of last season when it was just, it looked like the Canucks were just a beer league team not playing defense at all. And just before Chris goes, no, I'm kidding, Chris, you can actually go now.
No, hold on.
We had to give more time for coming on late. So.
I still had, hold on. All right. Chris go, and then I got something else to say at the end.
So an elf and a midget in 2 back-to-back games. Yeah, he's definitely on a friendship tour for sure.
Saying, oh yeah, I'm okay with him being, the 6'7" defenseman. No, he is a AHL defenseman right now.
Look, Shonky, don't mind Devin, okay? We all struggle with Devin, so you know.
That's right. Welcome to the Shifts and Pucks podcast. My name is not Kevin Olenek. My name is Sean Holmes-Smith. Kevin is not here this week. He is busy doing play-by-play for the Greater Vancouver Canadians as they are in the playoffs in Game 3 of a playoff series. So I am in control today, and we'll see what happens. Chris seems to have more confidence in me than I do to keep us from going too far off the road, but we'll see what happens. But hello, Chris.
Hello. I mean, I was partially joking, and I was almost about to interject and be like, "God help us all."
No, that's not a joke for me. We need a prayer. I think we're going to be feeling the rumble strips, maybe even the edge of the pavement here at some point. So.
And hello, Tyler.
Hello, guys. Yes, I believe this is our second go with Sean at the controls. I know it's the second one for me anyways. But Yes, Kevin, he's a man of many talents and very busy play-by-playing. And, of course, as always, Kev, good call. Let's have a good call. Enjoy the game. Hopefully it's an entertaining one that is compelling right to the finish.
Yeah, before we start, I do want to say, I want to shout out Kevin for doing the play-by-play for the Greater Vancouver Canucks, and I want to shout out everyone who's doing that for all these playoff games that are going on in minor hockey right now, as well as I want to shout out the officials too. And Tyler, you're one that has to do a lot of these officiating in these heated games where everyone gets upset. But without the play-by-play, there's a lot of people who wouldn't be able to watch and listen to these games. And without the officials, we wouldn't have games. So please remember that. Please make sure that we do give props to everyone who is helping putting on these games. And as well as I want to do a quick, on the spot, I'm already driving us into the ditch here. I want to say congratulations to Dean Morton, 1,005 games as a NHL official, and is now retired.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I believe his final game was the Red Wings and the Flames on Saturday. Was that correct? Yes.
Yeah, correct.
So stick tap to Dean Morton.
Yep. All right. So yes, Monday. You know what that means? Is Canucks talk. We're back to normal. We're not switching things up. We're back to Canucks talk on Monday. And we're a week away from the trade deadline, and the Canucks have really battled back into into the playoff contention here. And there's a lot of people who thought they'd be sellers at this point, but that is very much in the air at this point. But one thing that might change things, depending on where he is at, because he missed the game last night against the Tampa Bay Lightning. Elias Pettersson, he is day-to-day with an upper body injury. If it's only day-to-day, I don't think it changes too much, but a Pettersson injury could change how Jim Rutherford and Patrick Alvey and the Canucks management view this trade deadline and what they do.
Mm-hmm. Please don't let it be a risk. Please don't let it be a risk.
Yeah. Now, if I saw the reports right, he did skate this morning, is doubtful for tomorrow night against the Devils, but the fact he is on the ice should be a good sign that it's not a long-term thing. But last year went from day to day to weeks to being shut down. So, yeah.
Speaking of skating today, Sutter was skating as well. So props for Sutter getting back to a point where he's able to at least skate with some of the guys.
Yeah, like regardless of whether or not he gets into any games this season or even for the rest of his career, the fact that he's skating and recovering from this long COVID that he's been dealing with, I think is really good for him, and I wish him the best. But do you think that any sort of, if PD is out for even a week or so, does that change any approach to this deadline for the Canucks management?
Chris?
For the deadline, I'd probably say no. As far as whether that affects how the Canucks perform for the rest of the season, I would say yes. Like, because we're basically clawing and scratching to try and get into that last playoff spot. So anything without PD for more than a game or two, like, I think would definitely hurt the Canucks' chance. But as far as how Rutherford, Alvin, and the management group are going to treat the deadline, I doubt it.
Yeah, I doubt that too. It's one player. Yeah, it's one of your most important players if you're the Canucks. But you got to look at this a little bigger picture than that. I think the team has gotten to this point not just because of Elias Pettersson. I mean, if we actually want a singular, say there's a singular effort that's really made the difference. Goaltending obviously would be probably the reason why the Canucks are in this playoff chase. But no, and it doesn't seem like at this moment that PD is going to be out for that long. So no, I think at this stage, a week out from the trade deadline, the Canucks are probably going to be in a stand pat position more than anything. Maybe some tweaks, but I was one of these people that a month ago felt like some sort of selling was the direction that they'd go. And now I don't think you can do that. I don't think it's fair to the guys in that dressing room, especially the ones under contract for next year, to be, removing big pieces at this stage when, they're only a few points out of a playoff spot with 22 games to go.
Even moving a Motte or a Schenn doesn't even seem all that likely at this point. So, yeah I really think that it's going to be an off-season overhaul if they go that route.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I've been thinking for even a couple weeks now. I think it's the only player that they have to really make a decision on by the deadline, whether or not they sign or trade him, is Tyler Motte. Yeah. And that's because he's the only UFA of note going into this offseason for the Canucks. The only other player that I think they might want to try and make a decision on early is Brock Besser, because that qualifying offer at around $7.5 million is a bit cumbersome going in if they're trying to bring in some cap flexibility going forwards. But in all reality, it's Tyler Motte who's the only one that they have to make a decision on going into Monday next week. And Chris, what do you think the Canucks are going to do with Tyler Motte by next week?
I feel like the closer we get to it, the more my personal wish merges with what I think will actually happen. And ultimately, I think that's going to be trying to potentially re-sign him and keep him, because I just the way he's performed for the Canucks, that he's a Rutherford type guy and that Rutherford would like to keep him. It's just a matter of whether they can make that cap friendly for the team. Mm-hmm. So maybe they have to give extra term to keep him at a lower AAV. But I just really hope that they're able to keep him selfishly, both as well as for the team success.
Yeah, the other thing is Jim Rutherford has sort of made some comments about how the Canucks play in terms of speed and needing to play fast, and Motte's one of the guys that helps drive that pace of the team. So if you're going to move him, who do you replace him with, right? There's good value to be had with Tyler Motte, but on the other hand, that would make him an attractive trade piece as well. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I'm really keeping my eye on that. I think a deal with Brock Besser is going to be a little more of a challenge in terms of getting a return that will sell with the fans, if that's even possible. If I had to put a wager on who's more likely to move at this point, I think I would lean towards Motte myself. But I don't have any scoops there to really back that up. It's just a hunch.
I think the thing with Tyler Motte is I think they might pull what Gilman and Gillis did with Burrows and offer him a 2 to 3 4-year deal at a lower than what is expected, what he could get on the market, and say, this is our offer. If you don't like it, we're going to trade you, but we're trying to build something here, and we think you're a big part of it, but we need this cap flexibility, and this is still a very fair offer. It's just not potentially what you could get on the once you hit UFA, and you go from there. And if he says no, I want to test UFA, then you trade him. But if he says yes, I want to stay here, then you sign him and you're good to go, because Tyler Motte is not your typical fourth liner. He's a really good penalty killer. Look at his stats for this past 82 games. That's not fourth line material.
Yeah, he seems to kind of fall in between the typical third liner and fourth liner. It's like a 3.5 liner.
And his agent has even said that on when he's done radio hits, and as well as I think Donnie and Dolly as well.
Yes.
I think what we'll see. Yeah, I think he's more of a good third piece on a third line. So again, you don't necessarily want to overpay for that, but he's still very valuable, especially on the penalty kill. And he's one of the few guys on the penalty kill that has been good.
So if we're speculating, go ahead.
I was going to say, and the hope is, and we again don't want to put too much in the playoff bubble of 2020, but he is one of those players where when you get into the playoffs and coaches start focusing on matchups and trying to strategize against the star players of their opposition, that creates more room for a guy like Tyler Motte to really shine. And we saw that on the one occasion, and I'm confident we'll see that again if the Canucks get a shot with him in the postseason.
So if we're speculating as to what that potential team-friendly deal would be, if he's currently making around 1.25, like what would be that fair deal? Like, are we talking like 1.5, 1.75 at 3 years?
I think you're pushing up around 2, because I think if he goes to market, he's going to get 2.5 plus.
I was going to say definitely over 2. I wasn't sure what the ceiling on that would be.
Got to factor some inflation in there too, right?
True.
Yeah, we don't know how long this. The cap was supposed to go up by $1 million this year, but that was before everything happened in Canada with teams not being able. Yeah, COVID restrictions where they weren't allowed to sell enough tickets here. So I think we're going to be stuck with an 81.5 cap going into next season. And I think you're still going to have that for at least 1 or 2 more after that. So it depends on how long the deal is. Also
pre-Coyotes arena deal as well. Something to keep in mind.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to – I honestly think if you offer him around 3 years, around $2 million, and see what happens, and maybe it gets bumped up to 2.25 type deal, 2.25. Maybe. Like, we're looking at Jason Dickinson makes 2.65, and we thought that was a good fair deal for him in the offseason. Now we're scoffing at not wanting to pay Tyler Motte, who's been arguably your best depth player.
Yeah.
So the fans have named the line after him, essentially. I think you have to look at that and go, why isn't that a 3-year deal at around $2 million? Not fair for both sides. If Tyler Motte wants to test the market, then yeah, you trade him. But if you offer him that, and why is that a bad deal for the Canucks? I don't think it is.
No,
it's just a matter of their cap space. That's really all that comes down to.
Yeah. And I honestly think we will see the Jason Dickinson deal by between now and the offseason, next season anyways too. And that opens up. He can be the Jason Dickinson that we thought we were getting at maybe even a cheaper rate.
Yeah.
So I look at it. It's like I feel like you have to play a little bit of hardball with him, even though I really like Tyler Motte, but I think you have to play hardball with him and say, if you want to stay here, this is the offer, and if you don't, we're going to be shopping you. We're going to trade you.
Yeah.
So, and then moving on, there's a on Saturday night, Elliot Friedman on the 32 Thoughts intermission mentioned that the Canucks are interested in John Marino from the Pittsburgh Penguins. I can see why they're interested, but I'm wondering, is he a realistic trade option for the Canucks? At least leading up to the deadline, because I look at Pittsburgh and what else do they have behind him on the right side?
For me, it wouldn't make sense as a deadline deal for the Penguins. They might consider it in the offseason once they're no longer hunting for that potential last cup for Sid. But yeah, as a pre-deadline deal, it just doesn't make sense for the Penguins as much as he would be a good get for the Canucks.
Yeah, unless you're exchanging defensemen, but then that kind of defeats the point of the deal, doesn't it?
Like, though I saw some scuttlebutt today that maybe Tyler Myers is getting some talk. Maybe that's part of it. And then you are moving out a shorter term deal with Tyler Myers for a longer term deal in John Marino, because he's signed at 4.4 for another 5 years after this.
5 years, whoa! Whereas Myers only has 2 years left at 6, right?
Yeah. So, are you willing to take that gamble on a 24-year-old right-handed shot John Marino, who has been the guy who takes over the power play when Letang has been injured, or has been the second unit power play guy on Pittsburgh, but has had a bit of a rough patch this season? Is that a gamble that it makes sense for the Canucks? I mean, you'd be losing $1.6 million on the cap, but you're tied in so much long term.
Yeah, and I think for the Canucks, if they're going to spend any more money in any aspect, it's got to be on defense and in particular a partner for Quinn Hughes. So, yeah, I'm not sure you're solving too many issues there, but a situation to monitor. Often with these things where there's smoke, there's fire. So I guess we'll find out here in the next week or so.
Yep.
Yeah, I just look at that and that Pittsburgh's in a situation where they've got Malkin's deal is up at the end of this season. That frees up $9.5 million. According to Cap Friendly, they will have 4.75 of deadline cap space currently, so they would have room to make a big move. Brian Rust needs a new deal. He's 29. Kasperi Kapanen is an RFA with Arbrights at 25. He needs a new deal.
And Rutherford wouldn't mind potentially picking him up again.
Evan Rodriguez is having a coming out party season, a career season, and he's 28. He's due for a significant raise off of his $1 million he's making now. And Chris Letang will need a new deal. So that's the other thing is, like, if Letang goes, like, what are they stuck with on the what do they have on the right side? So I really think I don't see the fit from Pittsburgh's side. I definitely see why Canucks would be interested, though.
Yeah, any move to try and deepen your defense core and get some younger legs back there is one that the Canucks should be interested in. But again, it's trying to make a deal work and make it fit with dollars and cents as well.
Yeah, you want to invest in them while they're young and relatively cheap, as opposed to paying for them on their premium contract, like we did with a Myers and like we did with even like giving Poolman a significant raise when I'm not sure Benning really won that deal. But we all know that Benning wasn't really the strongest at free agent signings either. So
yeah, you just have to kick some dirt on him on this show, eh? It's true though. It is true.
Yeah, I looked at the John Marino potential. Like, has 20 in his rookie season coming out of Harvard. He had 26 points in 56 games. Then he put up 13 points in 52 games last season. And he's got 19 points in 60 games this season with only one goal. But he's also been I look at that and I go, is he worth that long-term deal? I can understand why you would want that. There is upside there. That's a risky deal, but maybe that's something that the Canucks need to be making, is some sort of risky gamble here, that maybe try and downgrade on. Well, just because if Tyler Myers isn't within that deal, say it's a winger D package going either way, so it'd be like a Besser and Myers for Marino and Kapanen type deal. I'm not saying that that's exactly what the trade would be. I bet you there'd be picks going either way to try and even it out. But that would really open up some cap room for the Canucks, because Kapanen wouldn't be getting nearly as much as Besser, and you lose $1.6 million on the cap for John Marino. And could John Marino be just as effective as a Tyler Myers?
Yeah.
I mean, like you said, it's a gamble, but if it pays out, then yeah, it's obviously worth it for the Canucks, but you don't know that ahead of time.
Honestly,
I would think that Myers is more of a known quantity. I know people might cringe at me praising Myers here, but I think that's the concern there.
Who's the plus-minus leader on the Canucks right now?
I don't know that off the top of my head.
Tyler Myers.
There you go.
And plus-minus is a tough stat to really judge, but when it's Tyler Myers, I think you have to look and see that he's actually been very effective for the Canucks this year.
Yeah.
And he gets shit on way too much by this Canucks fan base because of that contract.
But he's definitely played the best of this contract this season, for sure. No argument there.
So I might have talked myself into it, because I think no matter what the Canucks do, there's going to be risk involved here. Like, we even going into some JT Miller talk, like, there's risk in signing him long term because of his age, but there's also risk trading him because he's such an integral part to that locker room.
He's the heartbeat of the team this season.
He is.
Yeah.
And I know there are people out there saying, no, you have to be cold-hearted about this. I'm like, I mean, maybe in the off season you can, but not during in season.
Yeah, that's a good point, because you're not talking about disrupting the chemistry of a team in the middle of the season when they're working towards something.
Especially when they're trying to build towards new chemistry based off of what happened with the coach and the management team earlier in the season.
Yeah, like that's the thing, to that point where they've already made a bunch of in-season moves, and now you're going to sort of disrupt the, like the core structure of the roster. Like that. I don't know about that.
And you're looking at a team that has struggled with culture and the feeling in the room for the past season and a half before this. Like, they had the heartbeat ripped out of the room in Tanev, in Markstrom. And
do you really want a 2.0 of that? I know I don't.
No, so I think when you look at that, and this management team still has to gain the trust of these players, because that, like, come off season, if they want to attract free agents, they want to be able to have references with the current players for wanting to be able to convince players to come and join the organization. So you have to make sure that they're still happy, and let alone Bo Horvat needs a new deal after next season. Niels Höglander's going to need a new deal after next season. Mm-hmm. And you have to find a way to attract players, and part of that is having a good reputation with the current players.
Yeah, well, certainly I think the management and coaching structure. I mean, if the people they have in place now is not a boost to the team's credibility for free agents, I don't know what will be.
But they still have to show that, like, they're making the right moves, and I think that's part of. Yeah. We've said this with talking about the Flames for a while, is like, what does because they've got Gaudreau, Mangiapane, and Tkachuk that all need new deals, and there's only so much money that can go around, right? So you have to find a way to find a way to get cap flexibility and find a way to cut some cap on players that may get more elsewhere.
Which is why they're all in this season, because this is the last real kick at the can with this core, because they can't financially hold on to it moving forward.
And that might also be why they want to be able to like maybe push their way into the playoffs. As long as this management team has a long-term approach and long-term vision for this team, and not just like get in for the sake of getting in, there's nothing wrong with going into the playoffs this year. Building confidence within the room, building confidence within the market.
As much as we might rip on Aquilini from time to time, I'm sure the team will not complain about getting extra revenue from the playoffs.
But it's about the long-term vision, because making the odd playoff run every couple of years and isn't good enough. You have to have a long-term approach here, which is why this trade line is so interesting for the Canucks, because you just don't know I don't know what the right move is. Personally, I think you'll hold serve here and see what this team can do. Like I said, other than Tyler Motte, they do have some players that have stepped up. Like Lamico stepped up, Highmore has stepped up, even though I think Motte is the engine that drives that line. But yeah, what they do at this deadline is not a make or break. It's not a make or break deadline for the Canucks, but they could still walk away looking really good if they make something. They make a shrewd move. But it's
also a good indicator of just what they're planning on doing moving forward as a philosophy for the team too.
Yeah, I think you can take some cues from that for sure.
But I don't know what to fully expect from the Canucks. I think, honestly, bare minimum, if they can find a way to move Halak and have that other team pay that bonus, so that it's not on the Canucks books next season.
That's a big if. Like, what would we have to take back to make that happen? Because I feel like it would be a shitty deal for a shitty deal at that point.
Yeah.
It would, but I think
stock is so poor right now. That's the problem, right?
That is, and it's just if they can find a way to make a deal like that, and it not costing them an arm and a leg, I think it'd be really, really good. And if anyone can do it, it's a Rutherford-led management team. Like,
the only thing with goalies, of course, though, and heaven forbid one suffers a season-ending injury. I don't wish that upon anybody, but that's the kind of thing that makes a team desperate to make a deal for a goalie. So a lot can still happen here in the next week, but if it's purely bringing in a goalie to try and improve your goaltending depth, I don't know if Halak's the answer for very many teams.
Hey, Dubas, I know you're struggling with Mrazek right now. How about Halak, huh?
Yeah, I was thinking about that, but I don't know. Like, is that really an upgrade?
It's probably more a sidestep than anything, but because of how this past week has gone for the Leafs, who knows what desperate move Dubas might make just to try and save face and try and secure any sort of further sliding pre-playoffs.
This is where I wish Devin was on and not in the chat.
But he is in the chat, which is proving quite entertaining. Him and Dylan are having quite the conversation.
Very stick to his guns general manager, so I would be surprised if they do make a move for a goalie. But you never know who will be on the other end of the phone when it rings and what's being offered there.
Right now, I think there's two teams that might be desperate enough to make a significant move for a goaltender. This isn't Halak, because I think Halak would be a sort of depth move, just as protection against having, and that they would have any team moving Halak, getting Halak would have to have the cap space next season. Because like if the Canucks are moving him, it's going to be to move on from that bonus and everything here. So. They would have to have that cap space, and they would have to be an all-in team for this season. So I wouldn't be honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if if Halak is a Dubas move. I wouldn't be, because they are an all-in team this season. If
like I say though, is that really an improvement over what they have now?
The argument I would make is Halak is not as injury prone as Campbell or Mrazek, and that was my biggest beef with that goaltender tandem when they first announced it at the start of the season. I think me and Sean both kind of predicted that this is a big gamble for the Maple Leafs going into questionably injury prone goaltenders as their tandem.
Yeah, I just look at that and if Dubas is someone who's sort of doesn't want to give up too much, because even though they're kind of all in, maybe they do. I know Devin's screaming in the comments going, no, stop it. But I honestly think that if they don't want to spend the assets to make a big splash for a Fleury, or maybe a Varlamov out of the Islanders, but what if I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. Halak for a fifth, and you take that bonus. Fine. Halak for a bag of pucks, and you take that bonus. The Canucks would take it, right? Mm-hmm. I don't see it. The Canucks. They would honestly, why wouldn't you? If you're so stick to your guns, you don't want to give up any assets, why not?
And because the Maple Leafs are always in cap trouble, right at that upper limit, they're always stuck in that bargain basement hunting as far as depth pieces for it has to be a money in, money out trade for them. Yeah. So to me, Halak kind of makes the most sense of any goalie on the market right now for me, even though I know Devin is going to be screaming his face off at me for saying that.
I think it's more of a could it happen? I could see it, just because he's had a shit year, but he's a proven commodity in the past. And Devin, Peter Mrazek's been absolutely horrific the last few games, and Jack Campbell's been struggling just as much,
and is also out for 2 to 4 weeks.
Yeah, so are you going to play that? Here, I actually have Eric Kallgren. I honestly think you're gonna. I wouldn't be surprised if they make a depth move for someone, and it could be Halak. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying it is going to be, and I still question myself as we're talking about this, but it could be.
I'm just of the belief, like I said earlier, that Dubas is too stubborn to make that move. Yeah, it's just
if it blows up in his face,
almost an ego thing.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But they're an all-in team. The other team that there are two other teams that I could see it potentially. Vegas is one, but I think Vegas would be big game hunting with Leonard out long term, and especially if they continue to lose and start panicking. But the other one would be Colorado, just for depth. Maybe they still have that PTSD from the bubble when they went down to their fourth or fifth goalie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, see, to me, that seems more like the type of move for Halak where he's going to a team that's already strong, but their number two goalie is still a bit of a question mark, and they would have a demonstrative improvement there. Like the Leafs situation is that are the fans really confident in either of those guys that they have? That's a big issue.
Is really a question mark though? I from everything I've read, they're quite high on him. So
management might be management might be high on Jack Campbell, but is anybody else actually that high on Jack Campbell? To me, I'm not going to dump on him, but he's still an unproved in a lot of respects.
You're talking Colorado though.
With Colorado, I don't know if there are. We don't follow them as closely, but it doesn't seem to be as many. There doesn't seem to be as much sky is falling description around the team's goaltending, although there are questions.
The only issue would be his Halak's no move clause, right?
Yeah.
That's the wrench in every conversation.
And you would think that Yarrow would be willing to waive for Colorado, wouldn't he?
He'd be the third goaltender there, right?
So it really depends on how much he would play at his destination. I think is the big factor.
So Like I know Kevin brought up potentially the Minnesota Wild, but Talbot and Kakinen haven't been horrible, but they haven't been great, and Halak isn't an upgrade there. Like if you're looking for an upgrade, there's really only one legitimate option out there right now, and that's Marc-Andre Fleury. And
But
are you willing?
A significant price.
Yeah, that is an insane price. So it's just hilarious because they basically Chicago got him for free. So,
and the irony that Vegas kind of desperately needs him back right now
with Leonard out, yeah. I don't know. I don't know if the Halak thing gets resolved. Like I just don't know if he waves. I think that's the biggest one is where would he wave to go to? Like would it be, does it have to be a contender? Would it be East, or does he just want to play and prove himself to get another contract next season?
Well, I mean, if it's about not wanting certain markets or spotlight or pressure or whatever, then why did he sign with Vancouver in the first place? I guess, right? So I think it's not. But at this stage where he controls where he goes, you would have to assume that being on a contender at, late in his career would be the preference. That's why, Toronto makes sense in that regard, but Colorado seems like more of a sure thing, and they're a team that could shore up its goaltending. I mean, are fans there really that keen on Pavel Francouz? I would be skeptical on that one.
I think it's more, like I said, I think it's either like a full-on contender that he knows he's going to be, maybe he's only the second, he's like the third goaltender on a contender, or it's going to a place where he knows he's going to play and he can play his way back into getting a contract next year. Mm-hmm. Those are the two options, and I don't know if there's a perfect opportunity out there that he would wait for at this point.
That would be just like, even if that's the only move the Canucks made at the deadline was to find a way to offload Halak, that would be a winning trade deadline, I think, for me.
Yep.
That's exactly where I was going right at the beginning of this conversation. If there's any way that they can do that without giving up significant, without throwing assets out the door, or finding a way to bring in some other assets with another trade, to do that, then
I think we're ready to say that one, Demko doesn't need a veteran backup to shore him up, and two, you've got Spencer Martin and Mikey DiPietro waiting in the wings there. So that's that made sense in the offseason to bring in a veteran, but I think we're past that now pretty clearly.
And with the cap situation and with how Demko has proved himself, we need a cheap backup just for the sake of having a cheap backup, because we know Demko is going to be a workhorse.
Yeah.
I'm leaning to where he won't be, but Ian McIntyre did say that there was movement on that, on potentially him waiving. I just don't know where it would be to.
Everyone else has said otherwise, and it's not that I don't trust Ian. It's just more like everyone else is kind of saying the opposite, so I'm not sure how much weight I can put into that.
Depends on who they're all talking to, right?
True.
Yeah. And every source has their own agenda too, right? It could be an agent, could be someone within the team, could be another team trying to juice things and try and push things along. Could be the Canucks trying to push things along too. Like every source has an agenda that they're trying to push, and we don't know who the sources are, so we don't know what to believe at this point. And then, but I think we finished off the Canucks here with, like, do we talked a little about this a little bit, but do we expect a significant move from the Canucks before the deadline?
No, not at this stage.
No. If anything, it's going to be a minor cap relief move, if anything.
Yeah, and if there's a move to be made where you're not significantly altering the core and you're bringing back some prospects or picks, then that makes sense as well. But I mean that's pretty wishful thinking at this stage. I think you got to give this team a chance to see whether the playoffs are a possibility, and if they do get there, then we've seen before that anything's possible. So
The only way it's not a cap relief deadline move is if some team gets desperate enough to the point where they're willing to give the Canucks the war chest that they're basically demanding for a Miller or a Besser or a significant piece trade.
Yeah, and that just seems so unrealistic, doesn't it?
It's definitely unrealistic. I'm just saying that's the only way that it's not a minor cap relief move.
Yeah, exactly.
I look at we talked about. I do wonder if there's a hockey trade in the works here, not necessarily a trade for, and that's why I go back to what the John Marino conversation we had with maybe it is a John Marino and a Kapanen for a Besser and Myers. Yes, that's a very significant move, but it does create that flexibility that the Canucks are looking for.
True.
And Myers is definitely a defenseman that I think fits a Brian Burke, Ron Hextall team. Brock Besser with Sidney Crosby would be like just ridiculous.
The only thing I would say as an argument against that, though, is that the Penguins are a genuinely fast team, and I'm not sure Besser can keep up with that pace.
Yeah, but you play him with Crosby. I wouldn't call Crosby a fast player, like a speedy player, a fast skating player.
Yeah, not like skating fast player, but vision fast for sure.
And
Sid can work with anybody. We've seen that throughout his whole career. He can take the no-namer of no-name players and make them look good.
Hello, Gunsel.
Maybe not us, but somebody above our ability. No, Sid can work with anybody. I'm with Sean. I think that if you're the Penguins, you'd be excited about adding a Brock Besser alongside Sidney Crosby.
And with Malkin coming off the books, you'd be able to potentially coming off the books, you'd be able to afford him, right? You're going into the next contract. I'm not I know if Kevin was here, he'd probably be yelling at me for wanting to like that, but because I know he's very high on Brock Besser and his sniping ability, and he has proven it. And it's not just the shot, his ability down like right at the goal line, right around the crease. He's got quick hands. He can score really in goals in that dirty area.
Yeah, that rebound roofing goal from the other game.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But you have to give to get at this point, and that's the only one. That's the only question I have. I don't see them selling at this point, but I wouldn't be surprised if there is a hockey trade that comes out of nowhere, and we're like, oh, that's what we were missing. Mm-hmm. It may not be Pittsburgh, maybe another team, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's what happens.
And actually, Friedman kind of touched on that in the latest 32 Thoughts. He's like, there's probably going to be a move that no one saw coming that surprises everyone at the deadline. And that could be something along those lines. It might not be the headline blockbuster one that ends up being on trade deadline day, but it definitely would be something that no one really expected ahead of time.
Cody Hodgson for Zach Kassian.
Yeah,
that came out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Eric Goodbranson for Tanner Pearson. That came out of nowhere.
No.
And that was a Jim Rutherford move.
Yep.
So, yeah, I look at that and does Travis Hamonic have any trade value at this point?
Some, but I wouldn't say worth what his full contract is.
$3 million for this season and next. If I honestly think they need to find a way to move on from one of Hamonic or Poolman.
Yeah,
but I would say that's an off-season move at that point, though.
Yeah. But yeah, at this point, I think we're all in agreement that we aren't expecting any big deals, or especially any big selling deals from the Canucks between now and the deadline on next Monday.
Yeah. So now the question is more broadly: is it going to be a busy trade deadline or not? It's kind of seeming like it's not going to be a very busy trade deadline, but Earlier today, we should mention Josh Manson going to Colorado for Drew Hellison and a second-round pick next
Next year.
upcoming
2023
draft, but the
second.
2023 draft, yeah. And Anaheim keeping 50% of Manson's cap hit / salary per Elliot Friedman here. So maybe that's the start of the dominoes falling here. Is that move? We'll see.
The other thing with Chychrun getting injured, I think we might see some teams move off from him and go for some other defensemen.
Mm-hmm.
We're also coming up to, when is Giroux's thousands game in Philly? That's a big piece. I think everyone's just kind of waiting until.
I want to say it's this upcoming weekend, and that's why basically Giroux and Philly haven't divorced yet, is because they want to give him his thousandth game as a Flyer.
The other thing is, I think there's a lot, because so many teams are so close to the cap. They need more time. Every day counts to accumulate more cap space.
Yeah.
So I wonder if we do see a lot of trades on
Monday.
Sunday and Monday. I think we will see a lot of. I think it will explode, honestly.
But it might just be a majority of, as Sean was saying, hockey trades as opposed to big blockbuster like ones that no one saw coming.
Yeah.
It might just be dollar out.
It could be blockbusters, but I think there will be dollar in, dollar out, and then there'll be a lot of laundering of cap space through a third team too.
Mm-hmm.
Or LTIR.
Oh, don't get him going on this. Don't.
Okay,
you had to do that. You had to do that, Chris.
We're staying on the road.
Oh, we went over this beforehand.
LTIR wins cups. That's what we've learned. Because in the East, do we know? We're pretty much certain on who the 8 teams are going to be.
It's just who's in what position. Yeah,
where they finish. Tampa
it's the wild west as per usual, though.
Tampa was on a slide, but they got the win last night against the Canucks. Can they get back into it? They're 4 points back of Florida for first in the division. Toronto's on a slide. They're only 2 points up on Boston. Toronto could be a wild card team. That's how crazy that is.
For them, it's all about the matchup, not seeding. It's about the matchup.
Yeah,
they can get a favorable matchup and overcome that first round obstacle and get over that hump. Then the sky's the limit for Toronto, really. But that's
it's not a Florida team, and if it's not a Boston, Toronto's happy.
Yeah,
I mean, if they're a wild card team, that it could be Carolina, which would be the return of Freddie Anderson.
Ooh, that would make for great headlines.
Yes.
Honestly, I look at this and there's only one team that I think could break up that top 8 in the East, and that's the New York Islanders. They still have 3-4 games in hand on teams here. And if they can actually start winning, say they win all 3 games that they have in hand with they've got 4 games in hand on Washington and 3 games in hand on Boston and the Leafs. If they can find a way to win to gain those 6 to 8 points, they're within striking distance of Washington for sure.
So would you say that they have a higher chance or a lower chance than the Canucks at making the postseason?
Oh, I think they've got a lower chance because they're chasing literally kind of just one team at this point.
Yeah, so it's basically a pipe dream, but it's a pipe dream where they can see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Canucks are 3 points out of the 3rd spot in the Pacific.
Yeah, there's different paths to the playoffs for the Canucks depending on how the teams in front of them, hold up here down the stretch.
Looking at you, Vegas and Edmonton.
That's right.
Vegas is 7. Vegas is 3-7 in the last 10, and they've lost 4 straight. Edmonton has won 2 straight, but are 4-5-1 in their last 10, and we don't know what that goaltending is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what is really going to play a factor in that is how that Central division turns out. Whether it's going to be 2 from the Central, 2 from the Pacific, or if it's going to be like a 3-1 situation.
Mm-hmm.
Canucks are 2 points back of Dallas, but Dallas has 3 games in hand, and they're 3 points back of Vegas with a game in hand, and who are have the same amount of points as the Oilers, who have 1 game in hand on the Canucks. The Canucks are essentially fighting for 2 spots because Nashville's got 72 points with the first wild card spot. So. Nashville and Minnesota are tied for the 3rd spot in the Central and the last wild card spot. So right now, realistically, they're fighting for 2 spots as opposed to the Islanders, who are fighting for 1. And it's a lot, and they are significantly far back. They just have a significant amount of games in hand. So, like I said, if they gain the 8 points, that gets them to 7. That would tie them, right? If they can gain the 8 points that they're down, that would tie them with Washington. So they're not out of it, but the Canucks have a better chance. And then that Minnesota's 3-6-1 in their last 10. They're struggling. St. Louis has looked solid. Colorado's running away with the division and just added Josh Manson. Flames are they're essentially running away with the division as well in the Pacific here. Los Angeles is definitely put a gap on the rest. But yeah, don't count out Winnipeg either. They're starting to find their game as well. It is a wild west here, and Dylan's Anaheim Ducks looks like they are selling. They are looking long term here. But they also have a very young team that may not give a fuck and just go for it. So we'll see.
Yeah, the biggest question mark for me with Anaheim is definitely what they're going to do with Lindholm, because everyone was talking about he was going to be a likely deadline move.
They'd be smarter to keep him, in my opinion. Sign him to a long-term deal. He's that good. He's so underrated. People don't realize if he was in a market like Calgary, Vancouver, or even on Colorado, or like a good team, people would be lauding him. But let's move on here. Unless you guys want to have one sort of prediction of a team that's going to make a big move, let's do that. What team do you think is going to make a big splash at the deadline?
Ooh. Chris, go first.
I'm also mulling over what I want to say, though.
I just have to look at the standings and say, well, I'll just pick one here. I don't know.
Like, for me, just because of how their season has been so yo-yo-like, I want to say I wouldn't be surprised if Holland makes a desperation move to try and solidify Edmonton's chances. I'm just not sure if he's going to get that desperate or if he's going to hold pat. Because, like, for the most part, he's basically held pat most of the season despite that rough patch that they went through. So, like, I want to say Edmonton, but at the same time, I'm not fully convinced. So I guess that's my half-ass answer.
I'm just going to go with the Rangers. I'm throwing a dart at the wall here, but the Rangers, they're in playoff position. They are, a team that it's got lots of money. So, relatively new management there. Probably wanting to make a splash. That's one I would keep an eye
on. Keep an eye on Nashville. Same thing. They've got tons of cap space. They are right in the mix for a not only a wild card spot, but they could have home ice in the first round. As they aren't too far back from St. Louis. They're 4 points back of St. Louis, and they are quietly having a very, very good season. Matt Duchene has 30 goals. When the hell did that happen? Like,
they definitely have outperformed expectations this season for sure.
UC Saros has been fantastic. He's a dark horse to be a nominee for the Vezina. He's not going to win it. It's going to be down to Shesterkin or Markstrom. It should be Shesterkin, but
The only reason why it would end up being Markstrom is due to shutouts, but as far as goals against average, it's going to be Shesterkin.
Yeah. But yeah, look out. I think you look out for Nashville to make a big win now move, because they also have to find a way. I don't know if they're going to be able to hold on to Philip Forsberg after this season. Mm-hmm. He's a UFA in this offseason. So I do wonder if they go all in.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting, because like Poyle is a long tenured GM who knows what he's doing, and his agent in JP Barry also is a legend in what he does. So as far as that game of chicken, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out for sure.
It's a good point, Sean, bringing up Nashville, because if you go back and look at trade deadlines over the time that the Predators have been in the league, I mean, how there's more often than not David Poyle's making noise somehow. So yeah, that's a good one. I wouldn't surprise me if Nashville made a big deal there as well.
And then we'll move on to, well, it's been kind of a rough patch for the men in stripes that have been officiating the hockey games. And I know, Tyler, you've got some things to say about what's gone on, because we've had that missed hooking call in overtime in the Edmonton game, that missed sort of interference on Auston Matthews, let alone all these like just weird calls that have come out of nowhere. Canucks have been had two high sticking calls being called back because they happened to bleed, and therefore they could review them, which is a ridiculous rule. That rule needs to change. Mm-hmm. But are the officials are under the microscope too much right now?
No, I don't think there's ever such thing as too much under the microscope for the refs. I mean, accountability is important. They have an enormous impact on the game, but the idea that they've suddenly started sucking all of, this week, or gotten worse somehow. I mean, I think it's simpler than that. We're getting to that home stretch of the season here where the intensity's wrapping up. It's not playoff hockey, but it's moving in the direction of playoff hockey, where everybody's pushing the envelope just a little bit harder, which now puts the referees in a position of having to make rulings. And there's more of that happening, and the games are bigger from a fan point of view, and for each of the teams in terms of the standings and the playoff chase. So you put all that together, it has the appearance of the referees not doing as great a job, when really the game is getting difficult to officiate and the games mean more. So there's that. But on the other hand, we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. We don't know if there's a directive that's gone out there from the league about how they want games officiated or managed, if we can use the air quotes around managed. So those are some questions, but what we can see is certainly the intensity of the games picking up, and therefore making the job of the referees even more difficult. So that'd be my perspective on it. It's easy to forget that. It's easy to sort of get lost in just the watching of the game and expecting the officiating to match the level of play at all points in the season. But that's not exactly how it works. And
kind of the unspoken truth of, like, depending on the time of the season, or the time of the point of time in the season, like, reffing kind of gets called differently from the start of the season to the end of the season to the playoffs. So that transition isn't always as smooth as refs would like it to be, and sometimes they end up getting called out, whether justly or unjustly. So yeah, it's definitely
and it's hard to know how the league, right? Like, they've had a bad week in terms of negative press around the officiating. So then does an emphasis go out now all of a sudden on, we got to stop missing these hooking calls and stop missing these interference calls? And then do you see next week all of a sudden there's this wave of tighter enforcement? Like, we don't know how those machinations work at the NHL level. So that'll be something to keep an eye on here. But definitely as we get closer to April here and into mid-April, as we get down to the final stages of the regular season, I think you're probably gonna see a few more controversies.
Yeah, that Washington game just felt like such a slog. It had very much a dead puck era feel to it, to me, and it felt like that's what they were going for. They were going for more playoff style hockey. And that, where they just let a lot of clutching and grabbing and interference and obstruction go. Mm-hmm. And it just, It was so frustrating to watch because I'm like, we know how this game can be if they stick to a standard that allows for speed and all that to go. It's a lot of fun, even though like I do love a good battle and a good like physical war of a game. We just know how good that the hockey can be when the speed and the skill are allowed to show. But you also have to find a way. If you're a speedy, skilled player, you have to find a way to get through that, because there are going to be games like that. And I think you're starting to see that with the Canucks specifically. You're starting to see them figure that out. Like they struggled through most of that Washington game, came back, found a way to eke out a point. Honestly, they should have found a way to win that in regulation, but we've gone through this a few times on this podcast. Every player has to learn how to fight through the slog that is playoff hockey. That's what separates the good players from the great players, the great players from the legendary players, the winners from the losers.
Yep.
And until you can do that, you're just going to be considered a good player, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I mean the other side of the coin there too is that you've got to learn to overcome adversity, and a lot of times adversity is bad calls. Calls that just are weak, that cause a great deal of frustration through your bench, and then now you got to go out and kill the penalty, and if you get scored on, that's even another dent. In terms of the confidence and momentum, and how do you overcome that? And the great players always seem to find a way to do that. So there's that as well. I mean, the officiating is a necessary evil in the game. I mean, it's a part of the game. Hockey is a very subjectively officiated sport. That's not going to change. And just one more thing I wanted to add. I don't know this for sure. I haven't gone and looked at this kind of information, but I do have to wonder if maybe there's a few referees that are sidelined right now due to injury or what have you, and it happens to the Zebras as well. Their depth gets tested at different points of the season, and sometimes you have the junior guys that are being forced into difficult games that maybe the NHL would prefer not to have them in if they had their full complement of veteran guys around.
Yeah, that definitely could be it. Not to mention, we talked about Dean Morton retiring at the beginning of the having that happen at the in the middle of the season is weird to me. But yeah, they have to figure that out. And also, they just fix that damn high stick rule, please. Like, it's so just like
because it's a potential double minor. That's why they have the ability to look at that. But
yeah, I get
how much are we going to look at though? That's
it should be. I look at it and go, like, I can understand taking it away if it's the other another player, the other team's stick. If it wasn't that, like, the offending team wasn't actually the offending team. But if you're gonna like say, oh, it's a follow through, or like he lifted his stick in, like, no, you have to be in control of your stick the whole time, in my opinion. Like this, you can knock it back to a 2-minute minor, but to knock it back all the way, even though guess what, the guy did actually high stick the player. Come on, like, please, let's fix that.
Yeah.
Like if the players didn't bleed, it would still be a 2-minute minor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just keep it that way. Mistakes do happen. Like, as much as we hate it, mistakes in officiating happen. We just have to, as much as we want them all to be called fairly, it's not. You're never going to have a perfect game as an official. You're never going to have a perfect game as a coach. You're never going to have a perfect game as a player.
But often over a longer sample, though, that those things tend to even out, right? Like, even I see this all the time in games I'm doing where we might get out there and, contrary to what the fans think, once we drop the puck, we really don't know how things are going to unfold, right? And sometimes you catch 4 or 5 really clear-cut infractions against one team. You just see them, you're in the right position, the arm goes up, they get called, everybody's having a cow because they think it's unfair. But when you get to the end of the game, that tends to start evening itself out, right? It's very unusual to see a game sheet at the end of a 60-minute game where it's, like 10-1 ratio of penalties. Like that's not uncommon. Although it can start off that way and sort of trend in that direction and have everybody wondering WTF, right?
Mhm.
Well, that and you look back at the last Canucks game where they had the Canucks goal probably shouldn't have counted.
Yeah,
but they also had a goal that probably should have counted.
Yeah.
If the
now
puck was
that
loose.
some people may say, well, that was a makeup call, and that's fair comment, but a lot of the times it is simply just a random occurrence.
I think both calls, the way they were called, were understandable.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fast game. I think people we watch it on TV, get these slow-mo replays. It's a fast game, and I'll use that to transition to Auston Matthews is suspended for 2 games for a cross-check.
Mm-hmm.
There was no absolute reason why he would be intentionally cross-checking Rasmus Dahlin in the neck, in the head area. He was when I watched that replay, he was definitely gunning, looking just to cross-check him. And he was going for the shoulder pad.
Yeah, he was aiming here. It's just somehow whether Dahlin dropped the shoulder or what have you, it just ended up going above the shoulder.
But as soon as you have anything around that head, that there's going to be supplemental discipline. 2 games is a lot more than I thought they'd give him, though.
I'm going to be on the contrary there. I think he got off lightly with 2 games. I mean, this is a high profile game that this occurred in. The circumstances with them losing. And looking like retaliation because he didn't get a call, and whether he's, I'm with you, Sean. I don't think he's necessarily aiming for the back of the guy's head, but he's still aiming pretty high, and there's going to be consequences if you make a mistake. So I know a lot of fans are having a cow in Toronto over this ruling, but I think they should feel lucky that it was only 2 games, because we've seen some pretty severe rulings for stick work like that over the course of the last 5 years.
Yeah, the Toronto media was, at least from what I saw, was only predicting a fine or a 1-game suspension, but that also probably plays into that Eastern bias, probably, or at least I'm making that assumption. But yeah, I honestly, from what I saw of the highlight, I'd say 2 games is definitely fair.
It's very fair. Yeah,
I think it's just I've lost the ability to actually feel comfortable with knowing what the NHL will do with all these. With supplementary discipline, I was totally expecting a fine. Yeah, I was totally just expecting a fine. But I think personally, I think 2 games is fair. I think you cannot be cross-checking a player in the neck or head area. That should be unacceptable, and that you should be punishing them harshly for that. And
to me, 2 games is not on the heavy-handed side of the equation here. I think that's either fair or maybe even a little on the light side.
I think we know that the NHL doesn't want to go ridiculous with it, though. Unfortunately,
especially with star players.
Yeah, star player there, right? So if that was a plug,
if that was a Patty Maroon doing that,
even if it was a cross check from the front, the fact that it was more from behind and a little, unsuspecting, that makes it that kind of forces the league's hand to do something more about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
but another heritage classic where the goaltending's an issue for a Canadian team.
Yeah,
as Canucks fans, we know that one.
Yeah, that was a pretty stinky goal by Mrazek, the 3rd one. He owned it after the game in the media. But that's one of those ones where once it's in, that just kills it. That's just a killer for your team. And you could just see it across the body language too. More generally though, the comments about the outdoor game. I mean, I'm at the point now where it's like the All-Star game. Unless it's my team that's in it, it's really hard to get into watching it. It just is. That's how it is with these NHL events now.
At least from a TV perspective, I would argue that like if you can attend that in person, it's still a marquee special event to go to.
Yeah.
But as far as a TV audience, it does definitely kind of feel like a dime a dozen at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it really is just for sponsors and anyone who gets to go. And that there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah, like I remember, was it earlier on when we were talking about the Stadium Series game down in Nashville, and Kevin's like, "Wow, that snuck up on us." I'm like, "Did the NFL ever really promote the games where they went to like London?"
Yeah,
very big. No. It is what it is. It's a fun little detour off of the normal games. And if you watch it, you get to see Kevin Bieksa eat a hot dog live on TV.
That's or meet a family member he didn't know existed.
Yeah, or if you were in the U.S., you got to hear Wayne Gretzky on the commentary, which I didn't think we would be seeing this soon into his broadcasting career.
But yeah, I think they're trying things, and I still like watching them because I still feel like there's a bit of a spectacle to them. There's way more of a spectacle to these outdoor games and stadium games than there is to the All-Star game for me. I like it. Just maybe it's this nostalgia in me of like going outside and knowing what it's like to skate outside on the pond and do that. There is something special to that for me. So I do get it, and it does ring a bell for me.
I think it looks cooler when they put them in baseball stadiums.
For sure.
Baseball stadiums have much more like design to them and uniqueness place to place, whereas football stadiums are all, very similar in look.
Yeah.
However, the weather seemed to cooperate with this particular game. I mean, they had some nice angles where you can kind of see, like, beyond Tim Hortons Field and the sun setting, and I thought that looked good. While snow at the outdoor games is part of the spectacle and it looks cool, I think we're compromising the integrity of the game when it's snowing so much and they're having trouble plowing the puck through the snow. So it's always ideal when you have an outdoor game that's in conditions like we saw yesterday, where the weather is not a factor and you can still have a fairly high quality, well played NHL game on an outdoor rink.
That's also the gamble you have to go with when you're doing an outdoor game.
Yeah, I mean, like last year, like the Tahoe thing last year had so much promise, right, in terms of visuals and doing something different for the league, and then the sun and the elements ruined it for them there. So. That's too bad. I give them credit for trying, but that, like you say, Chris, that's a risk they're always taking.
Yeah.
Like, could you imagine that Tahoe game, or like where they could have it was cold enough to get this great snowfall the day before, where the teams go and practice, so you have the visuals of them practicing in the snow, and then it doesn't snow and it's cold enough, and you have this with all those backdrop. It would have been amazing. But yeah, as you said, Chris, it's just kind of. It's the risk that they're taking. They're hoping that they can get things right. The weather can be right for them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That being said, do you remember that World Juniors game in Buffalo?
Yeah.
That was fun.
Yeah.
That was
Again, though, integrity. They had to modify the pools to get Canada and the U.S. in the same group, and then it was like super snowy. So yeah. But whatever. Those teams always make the quarterfinals anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, you could look at it that way.
All right. I'm gonna take a break here. Just do pick and Duke read, and then I think if there's anything, we'll see if there's anything else that you guys want to talk about beforehand before we shut things down. But I just want to remind everyone that we've partnered with the Pig and Duke's pubs here in Calgary and are part of their Pig and Puck Club. They have 2 locations that you can go to and join the Pig and Puck Club. The downtown location at 503 4th Ave Southwest, and the neighborhood pub at 1312 12th Ave Southwest. The members of the Pig and Puck Club can get game day specials when they go and watch the Canucks and Flames play at either location, and members are able to enter a draw for tickets to the April 23rd game at the Saddledome between the Flames and Canucks, where Devin, myself, and Chris will be there to show you a good time. At the Pig and Duke, you can get their house beers, the Pup Life beers. There's a lager and a copper beer. Both are very solid beers that you can go and drink while watching some hockey there. The Shifts and Pucks podcast, we have 2 tickets to give away as part of the Pig and Puck Club to that April 23rd game. And you can enter the draw to win them by retweeting any of the episodes, including this one, any of the pod clips that Kevin edits and puts out there, and on Twitter. And you can DM us the word of the week on Twitter or Facebook. Any retweet will gain you 1 entry, and DM of the word of the week will gain you 3. This week's word of the week is trade, as we expect lots of trades going into the deadline next week. And we want to thank Joe and Steve and everyone at the Pig and Duke for supporting the podcast. And we do want to congratulate them on their 10th anniversary, as Chris shows there with his hat, that we celebrated with them this past weekend. The 12th Ave location has been around in Calgary for 10 years. And it's been fantastic, and they are a great addition to the Shifts and Pucks family, and we want to thank them for all their support.
You bet. Well done, Stephen and Joe. Well done.
All right. Is there anything else that we haven't talked about on this podcast?
I just wanted a very quick shout out. This is the final week of the Terrace Adult Rec Hockey League season. We have the finals coming up this week in both the Rec and Old Timers divisions, Tuesday, Wednesday, and if necessary, Friday for games 3 at the Hidber Arena in Terrace here. So I just wanted to get that. And then right after that, we've got the conclusion of the Central Interior Hockey League playoffs. Games 2 and 3 are here at Terrace against the Quesnel Kangaroos, and that was a well-contested game 1 on Saturday in Quesnel, 8-4 in favor of the Kangaroos there. So we look forward to all of this great puck here to wind up our season here. And then after that, I believe it's next week, the BC Minor Hockey Provincials and most of the age groups are happening next week. So good luck to all the competitors there, and good luck to the officials. It's an honor to be chosen to work one of those events. I've had the honor a few times myself.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. So please give us a subscribe on YouTube, subscribe on Twitch. Please follow us on Facebook and Twitter, Shifts and Pucks. And share us, like our videos, anything. All those things help us grow, because we are trying to grow here. And we also want to give a shout out to our family at the Area 51 Sports Network. We joined them a couple weeks ago, and they've been great. Last week we had Joshua Griffith from the Area 51 Sports Network and the Point Shot podcast to discuss the Canucks, and we will have a return match. We will be going on there to help them as well. And how do we follow everyone?
I'm on Twitter at tnoble, TNOBLE.
I'm at Schneids on most social media.
I am Beardy Canuck 03 on Twitter. You can follow Devin at GordHowe09 on Twitter. Kevin is KEVOLE on Twitter. And like I said, Shifts and Pucks on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, Facebook. Please give us a follow. Please give us a subscribe. Please give us a like. And we will see you. Yeah, please. And we will see you on Wednesday for Flames Talk, and next Monday for some more Canucks talk. Bye for now.